The sermon today is titled Sin and Blindness. Last fall, I spent a couple of days up near Corbett, Oregon, with a group of Presbyterian ministers. A teacher named Frances Taylor Gench was with us and shared her deep insights of the Gospel of John and how it's used during this Lenten season. I'm taking much of this message from that time as her teachings made me ponder and reconsider what I thought of this particular chapter from John. I have always found it rather amusing for the discussion that went on, but I have been given the opportunity to find something very different within the text. Traditionally, John 9 has been part of the church's reflection during its journey through Lent, a season of self-examination, and appropriately so, as it invites us to examine the state of our vision. The story includes a wide cast of characters and thus many seats that we might occupy. So with whom do we most identify? We have Jesus, his followers, the Pharisees, of course, a man born blind, that man's parents, and a crowd of people who thought they knew this man and definitely knew of his disability. John 9, beginning with verse 1. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man born blind. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work." I will pause for a moment and say that this particular phrase, "he was born blind so that," was inserted by translators to help clarify what they believe Jesus said. The truth is, however, that Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work." Continuing on, "As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then the man went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but someone like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he now?" He said, "I do not know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened the man's eyes. Of course it was the Sabbath. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened." He said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that now he sees. Nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." So for the second time they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." The man answered, "I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Then they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Here is an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born entirely in sins, and you are trying to teach us?" And they drove him out of the synagogue. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say we see, your sin remains." Before I delve into a different understanding of this passage, I need to make a comment on one part. The man said, "We know that God does not listen to sinners." If that were true, none of us would ever be in right relationship with God. So I'm not sure what the point was he was trying to make. When asked who sinned, Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. But so that God's works might be revealed in him, we must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work." The current translations we have all say that this man's disability was only to glorify God, and that it was God who caused the man to be blind so that God's work could be seen in him. That puts us in a tenuous place when we firmly believe in a fully loving and accepting God. Disabilities happen. They are not sent from God so that God can work a miracle. But we must work the work before us, and God's work will be revealed. That's different than what I expected, and I think I like it better. I'm not fond of putting birth defects, tragedies, accidents off on God. Not everything happens because of God. The virus we're facing is not because of God or God's punishment. How we react and respond, though, will show God's work in us in this time of crisis. We are called to help and be gracious and stay safe. The question of who sinned hangs over the whole episode that follows. By looking upon this man as an object of curiosity and for speculating on the ways of God, the people having the discussion about the man dance around the commitment and action that might relieve human misery. Jesus refocuses their attention on the real issue at hand. In short, stop asking abstract moral questions and get about the business of healing. Such business is essential to discipleship. We must work the works of him who sent me. John has a distinctive understanding of sin. This passage redefines sin by showing that it is exclusively a theological, not moral, category. Sin is defined not by what one does, but almost exclusively by one's relationship to Jesus, or lack thereof, and more specifically by whether one believes that God is present in Jesus. Jesus takes away the sin of the world. That passage is found in John 1:29, by the fact of his coming into the world, by giving the world access to the light and love of God. Jesus takes away the world's sin because he makes it possible for the world to redefine its relationship with God. Here we are at that word, relationship again. You know how much I love that. Sin is about our relationship with God, and for John, the decisive measure of that relationship with God is a person's faith in Jesus. This can be very upsetting to the people who want to define sin as not behaving in a certain way, define it by right actions, because then they have a norm from which they can pass judgment. Just look at the way we attempt to define sexuality as sin. There is a deep-seated need to do that so that we can judge people as not fitting with the norm, because we're uncomfortable with it. We want everyone to fit in our boxes, even God. Judgment is based not on what people do, which is what the disciples and Pharisees assume, but on people's embrace of God in Jesus. The only way to be excluded from Jesus' offer of salvation is to turn one's back on that offer. This is a radical and liberating notion of sin and salvation. John is the most radical example of salvation by grace anywhere in the New Testament. It quite explicitly relocates the offer of salvation to Jesus' life and moves away from a narrow focus on Jesus' death. The gospel is clear. Jesus' incarnation, not the atonement of his death, brings salvation from sin. I was very excited to hear this, as I have always believed that the incarnation, God coming to earth, was the major action in bringing redemption and salvation. What is especially significant about the blind man's progressive awareness of the acts of Jesus as Messiah is the circumstances under which it develops. He reaches deeper understanding, not in a reflective encounter with Jesus, as happens quite often, but in the process of confrontation with the Pharisees. They kept asking him how he could see and who did this, and finally the man asked, "Why? Do you want to be his disciple too?" He came to accept and understand the truth of Jesus in that conversation. This man's understanding of who Jesus is emerges from his struggle with those who would invalidate the experience of his own life. And this is the model that John holds to his community. Let what has happened to you bring you into conflict with the rulers, with Moses himself if need be. For in this process, your enlightenment will be completed. And at its end, you will meet the one who granted you your sight and know him for who he is. This is my hope for all of us. May we grapple with the reality of Jesus, whether in discussion with non-believers, in confrontation with the religiously righteous, or within our own doubts and fears. May we all reach the same conclusion as the man born blind. We choose to be followers of Jesus. Amen.